Our guest today is none other than Peter Gabriel, musician, songwriter, Real World record label owner, Real World studio owner, WOMAD founder, Amnesty International ambassador, 3D enthusiast. He is about to release his 12th studio album, New Blood, on his Real World label on October 11th. The album is a reimagining of many of his past hits, including Salisbury Hill, Red Rain, and Don't Give Up, using orchestral arrangements and ambient sound. A 3D DVD of New Blood in concert is also being released. I start off our conversation by asking him about the idea of recording with an orchestra and when that came about. He used it before on his recent covers album called Scratch My Back.
That project was a songwriter's exchange idea. So theory being, you do one of my songs, I do one of yours. And then I had to find a way to arrange it. And I was thinking at first about homemade instruments, and then I actually thought, well, if I looked at orchestra, then there are all these instruments people have spent many years developing and maximizing in terms of expression and everything else. And I'd never really done orchestra before. I mean, I've worked with some string sections and performed a couple of songs, but not as a sort of creative project. So it was very interesting to me. And I listened to a few arrangers and found this wonderful man, John Metcalf, who I've now worked with since then, and we began doing the Scratch My Back record. And then taking that out on the road, it was only about an hour's worth of material, so I wanted at least another hour, and then the idea of looking at my stuff came up.
What were the criteria for things you wanted to explore?
Well, again, I thought it would be a lot more interesting if we could try and get something that would stand up as a sort of single journey, if you like, a selection of songs that you could ride through, and it would be an interesting progression. So I didn't want to do just the greatest hits, and so we didn't do Sledge, or we didn't do Games Without Frontiers, Big Time, these sort of things. But we did do things like Rhythm of the Heat, San Jacinto, Intruder, Signal to Noise, which are different in the way they're composed in terms of structure and dynamics and variation. So, I mean, the only exception, I think, in this particular sequence is the inclusion of Salisbury Hill, which wasn't on the record at all. And then I had a lot of requests from fans to put it in. But because it is a sort of lighter piece, and we do partly homage to some of the Beatles stuff I remember growing up as a kid, when you at the end of All You Need Is Love, that sort of thing. I thought, okay, we'll stick it in as a bonus track, but we need something to separate it from the rest of the record. So I asked Dickie, my engineer, if he'd go up and sit on Salisbury Hill with a couple of microphones and just record whatever happened. And that's what is the sort of bit of glue between the main project and this extra Salisbury.
In fact, as we're talking, you will hear that ambiance in the background of a quiet moment on Salisbury Hill. That is one of a couple of songs on here that are kind of location specific in a way. That in San Jacinto that you mentioned. Can you tell people about Salisbury Hill? Because I understand it's near where you have the studio in Bath.
It is near where the studio is, and it's actually walking distance from where the original studio was that I recorded So and some other records. And I used to go jogging. It was about a 4-mile jog, and you go up the hill and run around the top. And then sometimes I would just sit down and do a bit of thinking up the top. And so I think that was the location for the reason for the song there. And it was, although probably most of it isn't true, there were some great myths around Bath and the 7 hills around the city. They're supposed to have each had a different temple on them. And on Salisbury Hill, there was supposed to have been a temple dedicated to Apollo, and King Bladud, who was obsessed with the idea of flying, is supposed to have flown off the top of this temple and unfortunately killed himself. So anyway, this type of stuff fed into all of that, I think.
Climbing up on Salisbury Hill, I could see the city light. was blowing, time stood still. Eagle flew out of the night. He was something to observe. Came in close, I heard a voice, standing, stretching every nerve. Had to listen, had no choice. I did not believe the information. I just had to trust imagination. My heart going boom, boom, boom. Son, he said, grab your things, I've come to take you home.
And the other area, maybe could you talk a bit about the inspiration for San Jacinto?
Well, I'd been long fascinated by some of the sort of Native American traditions and reading things like Black Elk Speaks. And when we were touring with Genesis, there was a night in the Midwest. It may have been Cleveland. I can't remember now which hotel it was, but there was a guy working as a porter, and we were just checking in. We used to drive ourselves around by car at that time. And anyway, and I got chatting to this guy, and he said in the conversation, well, my apartment is burning down. And I thought, that's a strange thing to say. And I said, well, why aren't you there? And he said, well, I don't have any means of transport. You know, it's an out-of-town hotel. So I offered to take him to his apartment, and he was completely calm about losing his possessions, but he did have a small cat in there that he was very worried about. And then he found a neighbor who found the cat. Anyway, it turned out that he was an Apache, and that he'd come up here because there was some trumped-up murder charge in Arizona, and he started talking about his initiation when he was taken out as a 14-year-old boy and taken up a mountain with a medicine man and who had this old sack on his back, and in there was a rattlesnake. And when they got to the top of the mountain, the snake was encouraged to bite his arm, and then the boy would have visions. And I think, you know, if he made it back down after a few days, he'd be a fully qualified brave, and if not, I think you know, he would be lucky to be alive. Anyway, when I was in the Palm Springs area, I went up San Jacinto, and there were some ribbons on trees that I've been noticing, and that all fitted in to some of the story. And so I started using that as a backdrop for my thoughts about some of this, and also the way that Native American culture had been absorbed into a sort of more commercial American landscape.
This is the new orchestral version of San Jacinto.
Thick cloud, steam rising, hissing stone on sweat lodge fire. Around me buffalo robe, sage and bundle, rub on skin. Outside, cold air, stand and wait for rising sun. Red paint, eagle feathers, coyote calling, it has begun. Something moving in, I taste it in my mouth and in my heart. It feels like dying slow. Letting go of life.
Our guest today on the cafe is Peter Gabriel, and that is a version of San Jacinto on this New Blood recording. There's a DVD involved, which you did 3D. Talk about the inspiration for doing that.
Well, it's a funny thing that I was obsessed with 3D about 20 years ago, and went to meet some of the people who were pioneering it. There was a guy who won an Oscar, Murray Lerner, for a documentary, but he also did some 3D work and had done for Disney. And then there were some other guys in LA that were designing 3D cameras, and we in fact did 3 numbers. And if anyone hearing this knows exactly where those experiments are, I'd love to see them now, because at the time, obviously, no one really had the equipment. You could see stuff in the cinema, but it wasn't as good or as accessible as today. So there'd been a long interest, and in fact, I didn't go seeking it this time. We had an offer because I think people are doing 3D stuff, and there's a resurgence of interest, and therefore there was some money available for the filming. And because I was, an old 3D nut, I jumped at the chance. Because to me, it's always seemed a bit like stereo. That we have 2 ears, so to listen in stereo or 5.1 is just really natural. It's like life, and we also have 2 eyes. So. And we get used to seeing in 3D, so it seems crazy that we shouldn't have media that can reproduce the way we actually see things. And like with stereo initially, a lot of it will be used for gimmicky stuff. After a while, people will just tend to get used to it, and that'll be the way it is, particularly as they, transcend glasses, which I think they will soon. I know there are some systems already out there.
Peter Gabriel is our guest on the Cafe today, and he is a man who does not dabble in small projects. Over the years, there's been WOMAD, the World of Music, Arts, and Dance, the recording project that culminated in the Big Blue Ball disc, of course, Real World Multimedia, the Witness program, your digital distribution on demand. One of the projects that was not so much involving technology that I always absolutely loved was the recording sessions you did with people from around the globe at Real World that culminated in the Big Blue Ball recordings. And I think I read somewhere that also you couldn't figure out a way to sustain that financially. Exactly.
They were some of the best musical moments that I've had. We'd have these weeks-long sessions and grab a lot of the WOMAD artists, and we'd invite other songwriters to come in and producers, and a lot of people, really great people, offered their time and talents for free. And but there would be quite a lot of overhead with accommodation, with travel, with food, and just running all the studios. And the sort of sales we generated, unfortunately, didn't support or sustain it. Still, I think if there was a way we could find to fund that would be something else, because it's really exciting, and it was like a accelerated dating agency for these musicians from all over the world, and they could meet up. We kept the cafe running 24 hours a day, and people would start chatting or jamming around, and then they'd have something and they could go into a studio and put it down.
Thinking back, do you remember any particular collaborations that were maybe surprised you that these 2 people would hit it off in a creative manner, or anything you witnessed in these sessions?
Well, this may sound like a diversion, but they have this enrichment program at the International Space Station, and I've now spoken to a couple of astronauts, because they allow the astronauts to contact people that they're interested in, or music they like, whatever. And one of the spiels I always used to say was that I'd heard from one of the astronauts is that you couldn't see any borders in space. It was just this big blue ball. And Ron Garan, who's up there at the moment, said, I wish that was true, but actually between India and Pakistan, there's this bright green line, which is very visible at night. And apparently it's the border. There's a sort of no man's land, which is covered with elephant grass, which is highly illuminated and is very visible from space, which I think is a sad reflection. But that leads me to one of my favorite moments, which was during the recording for Passion. We had the amazing Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan, who was like the, for people that don't know his work are sort of Qawwali, Pakistani, Pavarotti, and El Shankar is the extraordinary violinist that I've worked with a lot. And so in a way, that was India and Pakistan, and the way they sniffed around each other and then made this incredible connection, musical connection, particularly on the track Passion, was one of the moments that I will never forget from a studio. It was extraordinary.
Peter Gabriel is our guest on the Cafe today, and one of the things I wanted to ask you about was re-singing these pieces with the orchestra. Number one, just re-singing, getting back to an emotional place where perhaps you first were in doing these recordings. And how difficult is that? And I guess the second part of that is, what's it like singing with your daughter and Anna Brun, different people singing the parts and you sung with them in the past?
It is very different, actually, than I was expecting, because when you... the way these songs were starting to evolve, they took on a really new life. And to be standing there with sort of 54 musicians, like 10 times the number that I'm used to, all playing, great players, playing live, it's scary, but it's very exhilarating and exciting too. And although you'd think you are less exposed because there's so many players, the way we did the arrangements, I felt super exposed, that everything, every noise I made, every word I said was really discernible, and it was my job to sort of maximize interpretation. So in a way, I became a cover artist for my own stuff, and really got to like it. This was going to be a 6-month project, and it's now been 18 months. And singing with my daughter is just something I love to do. I think, when your kids grow up, any excuse you get to spend time with them is a wonderful thing. And I pushed her in the deep end, maybe a little unfairly at first, because, she hadn't performed in front of large audiences, and it was scary, intimidating for her, and she got nervous and went out of tune. And then there were nasty things, in the fan forums. And then she gradually found confidence, and by the end of it, she was singing absolutely beautifully with this very distinct voice. And Anna Brun, who's an amazing singer from Norway, has a whole variety of different influences, from traditionals of folk singing, Sami singing from up north, and Dolly Parton is another influence. And I loved what she could bring. They're both, I think, quite unique voices. And Anna, I think, did a wonderful job on Don't Give Up, which is so embedded in people's minds with Kate Bush's voice, that it makes it a very tough act to follow.
This is Don't Give Up.
In this proud land we grew up strong. We were wanted all along. I was taught to fight, taught to win. I never thought I could fail. No fight left, or so it seems. I am a man whose dreams have all deserted. I've changed my face, I've changed my name, but no one wants you when you lose.
Don't give up, 'cause you have friends. Don't give up, you're not beaten yet. Don't give up, I know you can make it good.
Though I saw it all around, never thought that I could be affected. Thought that we'd be last to go. It is so strange the way things turn. Drove the night toward my home, the place that I was born, by the lakeside. As daylight broke, I saw the earth. The trees had burned down to the ground.
Don't give up, you still have us. Don't give up, we don't need much of anything. Don't give up, 'cause somewhere there's a place where we belong. Rest your head, you worry too much. It's gonna be alright. When times get rough, you can't fall back on us. Don't give up, please don't give up.
To walk out of here, I can't take anymore. Gonna stand on that bridge, keep my eyes down below. Whatever may come, whatever may go, that river's flowing. That river's flowing.
Don't Give Up from the New Blood recording is our guest, Peter Gabriel, on the cafe today. I've got one more question, and it has to do with this creativity that we've been talking about. People talk about mathematicians peaking in their 20s and people at certain ages. How do you relate to creativity at this age? Is it more difficult to come up with ideas, or are they just coming as fast as they have in the past?
Well, I think I've been very fortunate in that whenever I sit down at the piano or try and generate musical ideas, they still seem to be coming at the same sort of rate that they always did. Lyrics, I think, are harder, and I've always found them difficult. But I think as I've got older, I'm more critical, and I think I know, I think I've written some pretty bad lyrics sometimes and some good ones in other places. So my internal critic, if you like, is exercises more muscle power nowadays, so slows the process down. And the other thing is just, when as a young man, I was a real workaholic. Like many young musicians, you have to be in order to get a chance, really. And I was a slow learner, so it would take me longer than other people I knew. And now, as a parent second time round, and someone who wants an interesting life as much as interesting music. I have weekends, I say goodnight to my kids, and there are less hours in each day, so the whole process does take longer. But I think, there is a sort of a fire. I mean, a lot of people would argue that, creativity and sexual urges are linked, and your libido definitely decreases as you get older. And so, I think the urge to spread your seed around the world is less, but I think maybe more focused.
Great answer. Peter Gabriel, thank you so much for talking with us.
Sure.